this is Amanda, and if you haven't been blinded by the glitter in these pictures, then you'll know that we're working with the Fairy Hugs glitter today. We're going to be using an old school technique called glitter stamping. I'm starting off with the hop, skip, and a jump stamp and using Memento Tuxedo black ink to stamp it out. I'm going to stamp it twice so I can get a nice bold black image. And then once I've got it stamped out here in a minute, we are going to move on to some, well, I'm going to mask it first, and then we're going to move on to some ink blending. If you haven't figured this out about me, I love to ink blend. Well, my arms don't, but I love to ink blend. I think it adds a lot to my cards, and it's one of my favorite techniques, so I hope you don't get tired of me ink blending. All right, so I did use some Avery Removable ID label paper in full sheets, 8.5 by 11 sheets, and that's what I use for my masking paper. And I'm starting off with some picked raspberry distress inks, and I'm just going to start in the center of my card panel here and just blend in a circular motion. I kind of want it to sort of glow in the middle, so I'm using my brightest and lightest color in the center of the card. And I did kind of slow down my ink blending here. Well, I didn't slow it down, this is actually sped up, but I'm trying something new with my editing here, and I'm not going to be speeding things up quite as fast. I know that when you speed up things like ink blending and stuff, sometimes it kind of makes people a little queasy, and I don't really want to make my viewers sick. So let me know in the comments below if this is too fast or too slow for you. I'd like to get some opinions on that. So here I am moving on to Seedless Preserves. And this color is kind of a pinky purple color almost. It's kind of in between the pinks and the purples, and it's kind of a nice in-between color. I'm going to be using some darker purples out towards the edges, so this is kind of a nice in-between. And as you can see here, it looks like I need to ink this pad up a little bit. So I guess I will need to do that after this. I didn't want to stop in the middle of the video and do it, so might take me a little bit longer to get this color slapped on here. So this is the second time that I had to make this card, unfortunately, and we'll talk about that as we progress through this video. But you know how cards just don't turn out quite the way you want them to, and disasters strike? Well, that's just kind of what happened with that card. So when I ink blend, I tend to go, sorry, moving back to this card. When I ink blend, I tend to go back and forth in between two colors. So that's what I was doing there. I went back to the picked raspberry real quick just to kind of blend out those two colors. I know some people tend to go straight through all their colors and then go back the other direction. I tend to just kind of work in between two colors at a time. So now we're moving on to the Wilted Violet, and this is a rather bright purple. And it's going to go nicely in between the Seedless Preserves and my next color, which is Dusty Concord. So I'm just going to blend that out, and as you can see, this one is a much juicier pad, so it's going on rather nicely here. So yeah, that first card, it didn't go so well, but I liked the ink blending on it much better than this one turned out. But, you know, things just happen, I guess. So now we're going to move on to the Dusty Concord. And this one, I feel like Dusty Concord is very similar to the Seedless Preserves, but it's just not quite as bright. It's, well, I guess kind of dusty. So we're just going to finish up the Dusty Concord here, and then I've got one more color I'm just going to blend on the very edges, and that's going to be Black Soot. So as we finish up the Dusty Concord here real quick, just got a few more strokes to add to get the white edges kind of covered up there. All right, now we're going to move on to the Black Soot. Now for the Black Soot, just because I want it on just the very edges, just to darken them up just a little bit, I'm going to use the Mini Ink Blending Tool by Ranger. When I just want to do just the very, very edges, I tend to just bring out the old trusty Mini Ink Blending Tool. I seem to have a bit more control with it. When I try to use the blending brushes on the edge, I seem to just kind of make a mess. I put more on than I want. I go in a little further than I want. And with the mini ink blending tool, I tend to get a more concentrated color on the very edge. And that's usually what I want when I want to just distress the edge and darken up the edges just a little bit. So I mean, do what works best for you, but this is what I found works best for me when I want just a little bit on the edges. All right, so we're finishing up the black soot here, and then I'm going to take my Nuvo spray bottle and just kind of wet it a little bit and take my dirty old tea towel here and slap it up. And then I did heat set it real quick. Well, I tried to pull off the mask, and then I realized I didn't want to do that. Then I heat set it. So then I'm going to stamp some star blossoms on here with a Lavinia stamp. And I didn't do this first because, well, I didn't want to, I guess. And because I wasn't going to mask them out. Now, the first card that I made, I did actually mask out those little blossoms on the star blossom. But, you know, when you make a card and you have to make it twice because things didn't work out, well, I think you just kind of feel like fussy cutting isn't something you really want to do all over again. So I didn't. Now, on my channel, if you're a viewer of my channel, you'll know that I tend to make my masks with my scan and cut. But the fairy's just so intricate, and these little blossoms with the stems and all that, the scan and cut would have ripped these masks to pieces. And when it starts ripping things that you don't necessarily care if it rips, but then it'll go on and start ripping things that you do want to keep. And these images really just weren't going to work for fussy cutting masks. It's just not going to work. So I decided not to mess around with it, and I was going to fussy cut, and I hate fussy cutting. So I just did the fairy again, and that was it, because my mask didn't really survive the first card, or after the first card. So I just did the fairy and decided I was gonna live with not masking the blossoms. Anyway, so now you see that I have these little archival pads. This is what I learned from the first card. So I originally stamped these mushrooms out in oxides on my first card so that they would show over the distress inks better than they are here. I mean, they're showing over the distress inks, but they showed better with the oxides. The problem is I'm not sure if it's because we had a flood in my basement a little over a month ago and I'm still having moisture issues from that, or if it's because oxides and Xyron adhesive just don't mix. I'm not really sure what it is. I let the oxides dry overnight even, but either way, the Xyron adhesive that I'm going to apply over this card front did not stick to the oxides. Just plain and simple. It just did not stick. And I heat set it. I let it dry overnight. I tried everything and it would not stick. It kept pulling up the oxide and would not stick to it just did not stick. Let's just put it that way. It was a disaster. So here I am making the card for a second time, and this time I chose the archival ink. All right, so I pulled off my mask, and now I'm going to Copic color this fairy. And I'm going to do the star blossoms too, but anyway, I'm going to Copic color the fairy. So if you're watching on my channel and you are a current, and well, if you've been watching on my channel, you know that I like this second view here because you can see the coloring a lot better. If you're watching on the Lavinia channel and you are not familiar with me, you've probably never seen this view. So, or unless you've seen it on somebody else's channel that does it. So I do like this view because you can see the coloring better, I feel, than a top-down view. I do apologize for it being dark. Instead I pulled the camera that I use for my top-down angle and decided to use it for this angle, and it's a much bigger camera, and it apparently blocked some light. So I'm going to have to play around with that. I was able to fix some of it in post-editing, but it's not perfect, so I do apologize for it being dark. I will have to fix that in a future video. Play around with that, get my lighting a little bit better. Anyway, so I will be popping the color combinations that I used up on the screen. If you do not catch them, they will also be listed in the description box below. I will also take this time to say that the rest of the supplies will also be listed in the description box below, and if they are available in the Lavinia World store, they will be linked as well for your easy convenience. So I'm just laying down my darkest colors in the shadow areas, and then I am pulling them out with the mid-tone and the light color. That is how I prefer to Copic color. I am a bit heavy-handed with my markers, and my hands move a bit slow due to disability. So when you move your marker slow, the paper sucks up more ink, and well, that's just the way it works. And so I find that it's better for me to lay down my my darkest color first and then pull it out with the lighter colors instead of going lightest to darkest, darkest to lightest, like a lot of Copic colorists do. So I get less bleeding when I do it this way. You obviously can do whatever works best for you, but this is what works best for me. So that is what I'm doing. I'm just going to do all this BG combination on all the places that I want it laid down, and then we're going to move on to the next combination, which is a blue combination, and that's what I'm going to do for the rest of the stripes on her stockings. And then, well, that's what we're doing right now, actually. And then we're going to color her dress blue as well, and then we will move on to, I believe, the mushroom. So I am definitely not an expert Copic colorist. I just recently got my Copic markers like maybe a little over a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. I'm not new to alcohol markers, though. I've had alcohol markers for, I think, a year or two, something like that. I had just had cheaper brands that I was never really quite satisfied with. But I've just recently invested in quite a few Copics, and I have been loving them. But like I said, I'm definitely not an expert, but I will share what little bit of knowledge I have. I'm just not an expert. So we're just laying down some shadow areas. I'm not going to claim that I'm an expert with finding the shadows either. I just kind of go with what I feel looks right. For this dress, I'm just kind of following the lines mostly of what the artist put in, and then just kind of putting them where I kind of feel that I need to. I did blend this out a little bit too much, and you will see at the end here, after I get done blending, that I did go back in with my darkest color and add a little bit more. The paper was already saturated, so I didn't feel that I needed to blend it out anymore. And just kind of blend it out on its own. So we're just finishing up the dress here, and then I did end up going back in with that BG combination with just the darkest color and the lightest color right now. That's what I'm doing, and just get that belt real quick. Then we are going to move on to the mushroom, I believe. Yes. And I'm just using two markers here, E33 and E37. And, well, that's going to be the main part of the mushroom. I'm going to use a couple other colors on the spots, but we'll get to that when we get there. And I'm just, so I started with the stock, and I just put in the darkest color at the top, and then just kind of like, well, the top part that's, I don't know, that part that's hanging down just underneath it. I don't really know parts of a mushroom. If somebody knows the technical parts of a mushroom, I would like, let me know. So then the toadstool part, or is that what the top of mushroom's called? I have no idea. I just put the top of the mushroom. I put the darkest color at the top where she's got her hands, and then the bottom of the top, because it is kind of a rounded object. And then I'm going to blend that out with my lightest color. And I did take a little bit of blending because I didn't pick a mid-tone. I probably should have picked a mid-tone, but it blended out all right. It just took a little bit of work. And originally I was going to go around all those little spots, and then I gave up. So for the spots, I picked an E57 to color in part of them, and then I'm going to blend it out with a V17. It kind of gives this this purpley brown color. I believe the the website that I got the combination from, I'm still looking up Copic combinations to use because I don't know my own, because like I said, I haven't used Copics before. I've just been using cheapo markers. I believe they called it like chocolate something or other. If I remember, I will put the link to the website that I've been getting, well, that I got a lot of my Copic combinations for this card from, in the description box below, but I make no guarantees that I will remember that. But if you're interested and I forgot, just leave me a comment below and I will give you that link. So for the hair, I decided to do black because like there's more condensed hair towards her head, and then there's like these little single strands that you wouldn't really be able to color towards the bottom. So I decided to make it more cohesive, I would use black. So I did a couple C markers for like the highlights, and then a 100 marker for the, you know, the dark tone. And I just kind of flicked some in. I did also leave a little tiny bit of white for some highlights as well. And then now we're going to get to the star blossoms. And like I said, I did not mask these out, so I picked a dark blue combination to go over it. And there are some lines in where the illustrator drew them, where there's like petals. So I just kind of drew lines, shadow lines up those petals, and then at the bottom I put my darkest tone as well. And then I'm just going to blend that out with the mid-tone and the finishing it off with the lightest tone. So pretty simple Copic coloring, really, but I think it turned out really nice. Unfortunately, these star blossoms really didn't show up much once I glitterized the card panel, but it was really kind of unfortunate. But I mean, it showed up pretty nice. There are two different kinds of translucent glitter in the Fairy Hugs glitter. I picked the pearl one. Maybe if I would have picked the other one, maybe it wouldn't have been... maybe it wouldn't have covered up my design so much. I'm not really sure. I will have to try the other translucent one. So at this point, I have run it through my Xyron Creative Station, and I'm just going to burnish it down real quick. Make sure that that adhesive is really stuck down, because now at this point I am gun shy. This is the second time I have made this card, and I really don't want to make it a third time, so I really made sure that I burnished that down really well. Now I'm just going to slowly pull it back, even though this video is sped up 2 times at this point in time. But I did slowly pull this back to make sure that if the adhesive started to come off with the release paper, that I was able to push it back down and burnish it. So here I am showing you the Fairy Hugs glitter lid. It does have like a larger hole and then like a sprinkling hole. If I don't know the technical term, but it does have a larger hole and then some smaller holes. And I am using the larger hole because we are glitterizing this baby. So just make sure that you cover your entire card panel and make sure that adhesive is well coated. And then I'm going to set the card panel aside for a second, and well, after I get it all coated, there we go. Then I'm going to set it aside and pour all that glitter back in that jar. And then once I get done with that, I'm going to take this piece of paper and fold it in half and use it as like a carrier sheet sort of, and put my piece of paper inside of it. Well, first I thought I was going to throw it away because it was covered in, well, it still had like glitter residue on it, because you know that stuff gets all over like craft herpes. But then I put it as a carrier. I thought, you know what, this would be a perfect carrier sheet because I'm going to run it through my embossing machine and make sure that glitter is really stuck on there. And then as a second little second little thing, I decided to take my bone folder and burnish it, and I didn't show you all of that. So then I'm showing you these Swiffer dusting like sheets or whatever. I decided to use those to clean up the glitter that was all over my mat, even though, you know, I was careful and I used it on the paper and everything. It still got all over the place because, you know, glitter does that. And so I cleaned that up with those Swiffer sheets, and those worked out really well. So if you were ever wondering how well those worked, I'm telling you they worked out well. As somebody that's not a huge fan of loose glitter, they worked out great. So then I decided to attach that to my card base, and I decided not to put a sentiment on the front, which is extremely rare for me. I didn't want to cover up all the hard work that I'd done on the card front and cover up all that sparkle. Plus, you know, things don't like to attach to glitter real well. So then I used the Don't Let Life Dull Your Sparkle sentiment and took a couple of those mushrooms from the that I had stamped on the outside, because as you can see, my sentiment got a little wonky there. I'm not really sure what happened towards the end. So I thought maybe I would detract from it and take a couple of these mushrooms and stamp them on the inside with the same Archival inks that I had used on the front. So there is the sparkliness, and sorry my camera is a little out of focus here. It will focus here in a second. But there it is in all its glory. So I want to thank you for watching the video today. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lavinia World channel. All the links to the Facebook group and Lavinia World store and all the products that I used will be in the description box below. And as always, have a great day.